Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome back to another episode of Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. We're your hosts, Jeremiah
and Thomas.
We hope that you enjoyed last week's content, and we hope that you're going to enjoy this week's content even more. Today, we're going to be going over everything 2023. All right, with that, let's get into this conversation. You know, I found it really interesting how many different driver changes there were this year. It's kind of surprising.
There were a lot, and again, this is kind of the first time that we are experiencing real-time driver moves.
Right.
Coming into the brand new start of the season, because when we started watching the races in real-time 2022, everything had already happened.
Yeah, pretty much.
And we knew it was happening, and we started with the races, and that was it. So as we look at this season, obviously a couple of the big-name teams staying exactly the same.
Yeah, you've got your Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes with the exact same driver setup that they had last year.
But as we get into the middle of the pack, we get changes.
Yeah.
Because these are the teams that are trying to make moves, I guess. And then some just, I think, got messed over a little bit.
Sure.
So let's start with some of the bigger teams that are making changes. Alpine, what are they doing?
So Alpine decides to drop Fernando Alonso, as we'll get into later with Aston Martin. But they bring in AlphaTauri driver Pierre Gasly.
Right, and we've talked about him a little bit. We kind of considered him and Ocon already the most middle-of-the-pack drivers you can get. I don't think Gasly improves them over what Alonso brought.
See, here's my thing with that. The way that Gasly was able to extract results out of that AlphaTauri, granted not so much last year, but he's in a brand new car, and this car, granted not as fast as the top teams, but it's a contender.
It's a contender, and I chose my words carefully that he won't improve them. I think they hold where they are. The number 4 spot in the constructors, and they consistently place 7 through 12 in every race.
I think that they're going to hold where they are in terms of performance, but because the other teams are improving, maybe some directly behind them, I don't know that they finish 4th, but we can definitely get into that later.
Okay, moving on. McLaren, the much embattled McLaren team, they drop Daniel Ricciardo.
Dang it.
And that's a big move because it's rare that you see a tenured driver that has real results get replaced with a rookie straight up.
Yeah, and what is Drive to Survive going to be without Daniel Ricciardo, man? Danny Rick.
He's still going to be. I guarantee you he gets as much screen time as any other driver because he's still in the Red Bull team garage now, right?
So the only difference is that instead of having an entirely orange hat and shirt, it's just going to be a hint of orange and a hint of orange.
But I do find it interesting that they say, hey, Danny Rick, you have won races, you won Monaco, you've gotten hundreds of points. We're going to bring in this new kid and do a 1-for-1 swap on you.
Which, I mean, if you're looking at his results, it's kind of an even swap. I hate to say it.
We brought it up at least once, but Piastri, 3 consecutive feeder series championships. 4, 3, and 2.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to disagree with that. I mean, when you have somebody that's coming in and they're causing such a stir in the lower levels and then they finally get their chance in Formula One, that's pretty much, I mean, any team would have wanted to have Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, and we saw Alpine try to stake their claim in him as well.
Didn't they try to sue him?
Yeah, in the FIA world.
I thought that it was just a matter of Alpine was going after McLaren. No, Alpine was going after him, Oscar Piastri.
Because I think he's the one that they thought broke contract, but as they decided they didn't.
Whatever.
Okay, so that's our big midfield matchup is the 4 and 5 seeds, if you will, of Alpine and McLaren, both making moves, I guess trying to improve. I don't know what Alpine gets, like I said, out of dropping Alonso. I think that's a lateral move, if anything, but maybe Gasly surprises us.
It's possible.
It is now a fully French team, so who knows what they're capable of, the French. Okay, looking down at the 6th spot, Alfa Romeo, no change.
No, they're going to still bring Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu.
Let's move on to Haas, the troubled American team that isn't ever really connected to America.
Oh my gosh. So Haas decides to drop the young gun, Mick Schumacher.
Was he a young guy?
Hey. He did good in the feeder series.
Yeah, kind of. And he has the
Okay.
Schumacher name.
Regardless.
We've talked about it. I think he will have a seat in Formula One at some point. It just wasn't the Haas fit. It's like the same thing when you look at the NFL, how the number one draft pick always goes to the worst team, and it doesn't work because they're the worst team.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the boat that he was in. And luckily, like we look at Oscar Piastri, he's not in that situation. He's going to a midfield team trying to fight for championship, so that should end up better for him. But they drop Schumacher, and who do they bring in to replace him?
They bring in Nico Hulkenberg, who has been a reserve driver for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think 2019 was his last year.
Yeah.
And his history is that of an average F1 driver. I don't know if there's a better way to classify that. He has gotten points. He kind of just puttered around in the midfield every season that he competed, which was starting in 2011, 2012-ish, I believe.
About.
And then went to that reserve driver role. And now Haas brings him in to, I guess, support K-Mag and just try to become more relevant. But they're not a contender.
No. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to extract as much data from the car as possible. And unfortunately, they don't know the consistency level of Mick. They don't trust the consistency level of Mick. So they bring in a driver who they know won't wreck almost every other race. And instead, they can extract regular, consistent data from.
Not going to break the car in half in Monaco.
Yeah, and cost millions of dollars to a team that makes nothing.
Yeah, they struggle. It's an interesting move. Like I said, I think it's a downgrade because at least with Mick, you have a guy kind of coming up that you can train and work on either him being your number one driver at some point or making something at getting a lot of ad money. You know, the Schumacher names bring a ton. So that's a huge gamble for them going back to Hulkenberg. But we'll see how it works. Yeah,
and the thing though is that he had all of this pressure, not necessarily just to bring points, but to not crash the car. And if you look at almost every single time that he crashes that car, it's when they're asking him to push. It's when they're trying to get him to the limit. So when you're talking about a kid who's constantly going over the limit, who's to say that this year he wouldn't have had a better handle on where that limit is? But I think it was just too big of a gamble for a team like Haas, who's not making that much money to go with. And instead of wanting to spend millions of dollars fixing a car, they'd rather just hire a veteran who has the experience and they can extract more data.
Yeah, okay. I get it. And maybe they're trying to figure out their place in the F1 world still.
Sure.
They've dropped the whole we want to be a midfield team, and they're like, let's spend a year or two figuring it out. Let's move on to the Red Bull developmental team, AlphaTauri. They lose Pierre Gasly, I believe, stepping up into an Alpine. I would consider that a promotion. Who are they bringing in to replace Gasly?
They're bringing in the rookie Nick De Vries, who was previously a reserve driver for Williams, I believe.
Right, and worked for the Mercedes organization, which encompasses Williams.
Which means, and he was testing for Aston Martin and all of these other teams that he was associated with that we've talked about on previous episodes. And now he lands himself with a race seat at AlphaTauri.
He is 28 years old?
27, 28, it's one or the other.
But he did, like I said, he's puttered around in the F1 world for 10 years at least, and he gets points in the Williams seat last year. He gets 9th place in a race. I think it's a good move from AlphaTauri. I brought up I'm a little bit confused how he's a developing new driver, but maybe they're just looking at him to be a mentor and try to help figure out that team. Similar to your Hulkenberg discussion, they have a reliable driver that they know can put tons of miles on a car from their test and reserve driver history. He gives them data, and maybe their other drivers, what they're trying to work up into being a legit long-term Formula One driver.
Sure.
Maybe Yuki, maybe someone else down the road, but right now that's Yuki.
Yeah, and I mean, there's not much more to say about that other than the fact that, it's not very common that you'll have a driver come in and immediately be dominant. Typically, they'll have a bunch of years going into it. Typically, going into about 26, 27, 28, and going into your 30s, that's when you're hitting your stride.
Yeah, you're not Max Verstappen at 17 winning races.
Right. So, if anything, I feel like he's going to be more than what we are giving him credit for.
I agree. I think he'll get points. We ranked them in the last episode, and I put Piastri over him, but you put him as your number one rookie.
I did.
Okay, last team on the grid and last team making moves. Williams. What are they doing?
So Williams decides to drop Nicholas Latifi, Granted, that also means they're dropping the Safina sponsorship,
Yep.
so you're not going to see that on the car this year, and that's fine. That's not a loss by any means.
Well, it's a financial loss. A huge financial loss.
Yes, but if we're talking strictly results,
Yeah.
no loss found.
No, because who are they bringing in?
They're bringing in the young gun. I'm going to say it again. Young gun,
Yep.
American driver, Logan Sargent.
And again, this is the driver that we know the least formula-wise about them.
Right.
We will be experiencing a lot of their first with them in real time. I'm interested to see how Logan Sargent does. I think his goal or a successful year for Logan in that Williams would be outside of the bottom 17, like getting top 16. That'd be a really good finish.
Yeah, I think we see Alex Albon dominating him in the first, I'm going to say even first half of the season. But I'm going to say as we get closer to wrapping up the season, or maybe even at the halfway mark coming back in, we're going to see Logan start to slowly match that. And we're going to have Alex and Logan pretty much finishing either stacked or with one person in between them, something like that.
Yeah, I could see it. I think Logan either finishes 20th
God.
or if Williams is finally figuring things out, he cracks top 16. Like I said, top 16, I know it doesn't sound great. That would be a huge step up for that team.
Huge, considering their drivers. Nicholas Latifi came in 20th,
Yep.
and Alex Albon came in, I want to say
17 or 18.
Yeah, it was below 15,
Yeah.
below 16, is way in the back. So definitely an upgrade.
Okay, so there's driver moves for 2023. Couple teams not making any changes. Couple teams losing drivers. We completely skipped a team, my friend.
Who?
Aston Martin.
Oh my gosh! And
As I look back at my list.
and the craziest part is that without a doubt, Aston Martin is my favorite one for this year coming up. That's something that we're going to talk about in a later episode. However, for right now, we can talk about the driver moves. So
Okay.
what happens at Aston Martin?
They lose Sebastian Vettel. I'm not going to say they drop him or whatever because he retires.
Right.
And so they had to replace him. And who do they replace him with?
Two-time world champion Fernando Alonso.
So it seems like Aston Martin just jumps from one former world champion to another that's kind of on the backside of their career.
Now the difference, as we've stated in previous episodes, Fernando Alonso is hot right
Yes.
now. Sebastian Vettel, he was still a great driver, but he wasn't with this surge of I'm making a run at the top again. I want one more world champion on my way out, anything like that.
After Vettel left Red Bull, he had a couple good years at Ferrari where he finished in the top 5, but then it was just not coasting to the end of your career, but finding your way out of the sport just naturally with time. Still a great guy, still a great driver, one of the
Yeah.
best of all time, but that was the more natural progression of an F1 driver. Alonso's the exception. Dominant, kind of a lull, and then getting it back later in your career.
Right, and the thing with Sebastian Vettel is it's a matter of he had it, and once you reach that certain point where you're not getting the results like he had on Ferrari, where I want to say he was, like you said, finishing top 5, top 4, top 3, maybe even.
Yep.
After that happens and you move to a lower team, your role is completely different. Your role goes from I'm fighting for a championship to I'm going to teach everything that I know to not only the second driver, but the entire team that I'm being hired on.
Right.
And so that's what his role became as he fell from Ferrari and moved into the other teams. Fernando Alonso, and it's kind of a weird case because like we've been talking about, he didn't choose to accept that role.
No,
He's
he's still fighting.
no, he said, listen, I can get one more. I don't care about this Max Verstappen. I don't care about this Charlie Lickler. I don't care. I'm coming for it all.
We'll see how that works out in the Aston Martin. Okay, that wraps up the driver changes. Like I said, a couple teams not changing, a couple teams making big changes. Let's go into rule changes, and I don't think we want these to be boring or monotonous or anything like that. We want these to be interesting, so we're not going to go into every single rule change.
Right.
But let's talk about some of the ones that are visible on track or that we think make the most difference.
Right. So for this year, they're going to raise the ride heights of all the cars by 15. It was either millimeters or centimeters.
Millimeters, not
Millimeters?
15
No,
centimeters.
no, I guess that would be a huge jump. No,
Yeah.
so they're going to raise the ride height, and that's in an attempt to get rid of the porpoising that was going on so much last year. They feel that if they raise the height, then enough airflow is going to get through. And I'm not sure how all of the technical parts of it are, just because this isn't my forte in terms of being a race engineer.
Right.
However, I know that the intent is behind stopping the porpoising that was so bad last year.
If you're unaware of what porpoising is, one, YouTube it, or go check out Ferrari any race in 2022.
Or Mercedes at the beginning of
Or
last
Mercedes.
year.
So what happens is the car creates a vacuum under it with the track. The downforce package on the front of the car and the side pods in the back wing make a vacuum that sucks it to the track.
Right.
As it gains and loses that pressure, the car bounces up and down considerably. You can see it.
Yeah, to the point of last year, Lewis Hamilton hopping out of the car with full-on back problems.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like limping his whole way back to the garage.
Yeah. They already have a workout with the G-forces, and now you add that factor into it. They're trying to keep their head like stiff and straight ahead.
It took him 10 minutes to get out of the car.
So, like Jeremiah mentioned, raising it 15 millimeters, they're hoping that reduces a little bit of that intermittent vacuum action, and that way the ride height stays more consistent. The next thing, they are implementing stronger roll hoops, which are not, as we found, the halos.
Right. And this is a response to the terrible crash that Zhou Guanyu had at Silverstone last year.
Yep.
They're trying to prevent, what they did is they rounded it out on top so that it's no longer going to be like these sharp edges that as it cars underground, or upside down rather, it's going to be digging into the ground, versus now with the smoother edges, they think it's going to glide a lot better.
And they think that's a safer structure. The roll hoop, if you're looking at an F1 car, is the part directly up and behind the driver's head. Kind of similar to where the TV pod is mounted, but that air intake looking thing right behind the driver's head. So they're trying to enforce that. Obviously, the halo plays a huge factor in the safety standards, but we didn't see any technical changes on that. Okay, weight reduction. How much does 2 kilograms get you?
Apparently quite a bit. If the rule change is so dramatic that 2 kilograms is going to be the difference between dramatic times and last year's times. They're giving all these people all these leeways in different areas, but the weight reduction, 2 kilograms, it's got to be significant.
So I looked at the weights. I think it's going from, it was either 798 to 796 or 796 to 794 kilograms for the car.
Jeez.
So you're talking about like less than 1% change. But whenever we look at times, like lap times, we go to the thousandths of seconds.
Sure.
That's less than 1%. And so now if you knock off 2 kilograms, you're talking about hundreds or thousands of seconds, which is a difference.
I'm wondering if it's going to be more than thousands or hundreds.
I mean, it could be.
I'm wondering if they're going to get
I'm saying it's at least. It's noticeable.
No, for sure. But I'm wondering how big of a change this is going to have. I'm
8 seconds off a lap.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe they're not breaking lap records around every single track
We're
this
breaking
year.
the sound barrier now.
No.
We're going Mach 1.
Probably not. But I think it's safe to say that we're definitely going to see thousands. I hope that we see hundreds, and maybe we'll see tenths.
Yeah, it's possible. Okay, I've got one specific rule change I am saving. Do you have any others on your list?
Not exactly, just the mirrors and
the larger mirrors.
Is that the one you were going to talk about?
No, that is one that I have.
So I can talk about that one. So the mirrors are going to be increased in size. I don't have the exact dimensions, but it's not going to be getting taller.
It's like
per
5
se.
millimeters.
It's going to get wider. And the purpose behind that is so that you can see people behind you better, and therefore making the passing a lot safer, because they're trying to get rid of a lot of the crashes that were going on as people are diving out from behind somebody at the last second, versus with the bigger mirrors, you can now have a better picture of who's behind you.
Can I ask a stupid F1 person question?
I'm here for it.
How do they see what's around them on the track? The mirrors are tiny regardless. Have you seen those mirrors? They're little.
They're horribly small.
They're little. And you're going 190 miles an hour. In Austria, your full throttle was at 95% of the time, something like that. It was over 90% of the time.
Sure.
And you're telling me they're whipping around looking, they're doing all their checks like you would driving down the highway?
So here's the interesting part about that is I actually watched an interview with Lando Norris talking about exactly this. And that question was, are you 100% zeroed in, focused for every single millimeter of track that you go for every single lap of the entire race? His response was, oh, sometimes I'll look at the TV. Sometimes I'll see one person in the crowd who has maybe their shirt off or something like that. And I'm like, how do you see that? Because I'm here to tell you, when I'm changing lanes on the highway, I look 4 times before I even change lanes.
Yes. Who was it that was talking about the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi, where they said they were watching Max and Lewis fight it out on the TVs as they were going around the track?
I can't remember who that was, but I remember them. Was it Fernando?
It might have been. How are you watching the TVs?
Some drivers watch themselves on the TV as they're going around.
I don't get it. Okay. Here's my last one. This one might blow your mind. It blew mine. I had to go read it on like 8 different websites to confirm that this was an accurate change.
Okay.
Qualifying and your tire allocation, or how you use tires, is being completely changed for only 2 events. Every other race is the same, but
What?
2 events are different.
How so?
This is a Pirelli experiment in conjunction with Formula One and the FIA. They are trying to figure out strategy and tire compounds and how to better allocate your weekend tires. We talked in the last episode about how a team will go out on the softs and just tear them up, and whenever they have to come back in and do another thing, they switch them out, and then they don't have that for race day, right?
Right.
So for 2 events in 2023, Q1, everyone will be on hards.
Oh, that makes it a lot harder for the bottom teams.
Q2, mediums.
So then I guess I can infer Q3.
Softs.
Wow.
Which means you can't burn softs Q3 or 2. But it also means those okay, so from Q1 to Q3, the lap times already dramatically get better.
Yeah.
Like by 2 or 3 seconds, we're improving. If you're going from hards to softs, I think we could see like a 10-second jump in time or more.
Here's my problem with that. If you're a bottom five driver, not necessarily, and the reason I say that is because after the end of Q1, the bottom 5 get dropped.
Right.
Now you can't throw on a softs and make a last second strategic move to not necessarily make it to Q3, but you can make it to the top 15 if you throw on softs in Q1, knowing you're going to get beat in Q2. But that alone makes you start 5 places up higher than you would. So that part of strategy is completely gone, is what you're saying.
Everyone is on the same tires. That also means that your car setup, so like let's say that you're going into a race weekend and you know you're only going to use softs and mediums. You've got to make a car now that can run on hards. For one qualifying session. For 20 minutes, you've got to make a car that can run on hards.
And, obviously this isn't going to affect your top teams. They're still going to get to the end regardless. Yeah. In fact, if I'm being bold, I'd probably say that a team like Red Bull or a team like Ferrari on hards can probably equal like
it probably
Williams
can.
On softs.
Well, I don't know about that.
Maybe not softs.
But hang on. I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
Ferrari was terrible on tire decisions last year, mainly anytime they went to hards. Their car could not handle hard tires.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So what if we see a situation in 2023 in one of these 2 events, Ferrari doesn't make it out of Q1 because their driver slides off the track or something like that, like they lose traction. Because the issue wasn't the tires, the issue was the car couldn't handle running on those tires and they would completely lose traction and grip. Wow. What if you have them slide off the track and break the car?
That would be insane. We could actually see a Ferrari starting in like a 15, 16, 17.
Yeah. Hey everyone, Thomas here, co-host of the Turn 1 podcast. We are at Turn 1 Podcast on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, Turn 1 on Facebook, or you can email us, trn1podcast@gmail.com. We are also streaming all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. Thank you for watching. Let's move on. We've got 2 more things for kind of rule changes. There's a cost cap. A cost cap was implemented last year, and I'll give some numbers on this. We don't have all the details on what you can spend and what you can't spend. We just know what the numbers are and who's already broken the rules. So in 2022, the cost cap for 21 races was $142.4 million per team.
Okay.
It doesn't actually seem like a lot. That kind of blew my mind.
Here's the problem, is when we first started getting into the sport and we were looking at numbers for the very first time with fresh eyes, Ferrari was spending about $400 million on their car. And now you're going to tell me they can only spend, well, granted, this is the second year of it, but only 142.
They've got to be going, like, there's got to be some things that just don't count or that are going around it or whatever.
All I'm saying is when they look at the reports at the end of the year and Ferrari has spent $150 million on team meals, I think we'll have our answer.
Right, we will get to that, and it's not Ferrari. 2023, the cost cap actually goes down to $135 million. However, after they implemented the 135, they said, hey, we're adding 2 races. We need more money. So now they're adding $1.8 million per race for a total of $138.8 million. Still less than the year before. But basically, they're telling these teams, you got to do this cheaper. That's what they're getting to. We saw in 2022, Red Bull broke the rules. They were the only team really that got called out for this. They blamed it on
meals,
catering, and it was something really dumb too. It was like, oh yeah, this one meal that was $100,000 pushed us over that cap.
We're talking that hundreds of thousands
in
of
a catering
of
meal. Which I don't think catering should count for the cost cap first. That's
Well,
ridiculous.
No, but you also shouldn't be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on catering.
You look at the NFL and they don't count meals against the salary cap.
Listen, man, I'll feed the entire team with one phone call to Domino's. We'll get some pizza. I'll spend about $400.
You're about to see Domino's and Subway ads on cars because they need their meals for free. Okay. Red Bull gets in trouble. They are found that they went over the cost cap in 2022. It took a long time for that report to come out.
Right.
A long time.
I mean, they had to investigate it. This is
They
new
had
territory.
to, but it took a long time. They are fined $7 million, which I think to Red Bull is not that much, but it's the principle of the thing. $7 million is still
Sure.
a lot of money. But the biggest hit was their 10% reduction in aerodynamic testing time.
Right. And after further review on this, I learned that actually, depending on what position you end in the Constructors' Championship, actually decides how much wind tunnel time you have. So with Red Bull getting first in the Constructors, that means they already start at 70% wind tunnel time. You take that 10%, they're sitting at 60% wind tunnel time.
I didn't know that fact until you mentioned it the other day, that the winners kind of get punished in a sense, because it all evens out. So the winners get more money,
right?
But they're punished technologically
Sure.
or testing wise. And like you mentioned, now you're at an even further disadvantage. I don't think it's going to affect them that much. But if this was a team that was middle of the pack, let's say that this was McLaren that got penalized with that, trying to fight Alpine, you just lost all the ground that you might have made up on them.
Right. And to your point about the Red Bull thing and how it's not really going to affect them too much per se, I'd agree with that just because of the fact that they already have the schematics for a winning car.
Right.
Everybody else is playing catch up to Red Bull's 2022 car. Meanwhile, Red Bull, granted, they might only have 60% wind tunnel time, but they're making changes everywhere. And all of those changes are lessening the time that it takes.
They love the car so much they've had the same livery for 8 years.
I hate that.
But what was it? Was the joke they should just make it a memo at this point? Hey, here's our car.
Instead of doing the car reveal.
Okay, last thing, sprint races. You want to hit that real quick?
Yeah, so sprint racers they're gonna up it up. So instead of doing 3 this year, they're doubling that, bringing in 6 sprint race weekends. We already talked about in last episode how that format looks in terms of the weekend structure, but the point is that now we're gonna have 6 of them, and 6 of them.
Yep.
and the reason why, I don't know, I'm not as big of a fan like we've talked about in the past is because it kind of hinders the backmarker teams, because when you get a team who makes a crazy lunge in qualifying and somehow makes it even, let's say, the top 10, now this sprint race happens and they get all of this track for those top teams to just get it right back.
I disagree. And I know
That's
we've talked
fine.
about this before,
You're
but
wrong.
I think it gives the bottom teams, which cannot compete in a fastest lap situation, a chance to compete in a race situation.
Okay. So if they can't compete in a fastest lap situation, how do they compete in a race?
Because you have actual driver instinct. You have the ability to get DRS, slipstream, take corners better, do corners multiple times and learn from your mistakes. It gives you the chance to use your driver's ability and not just what can that car do.
Okay. The only thing that kind of stinks about that is, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have to pit in a sprint race, which means that these top teams are going to be running probably softs for the entire race.
You're not wrong, and I get that it's not that big of an advantage, but I do think it mixes it up and it allows them another chance at getting into the top that otherwise in a qualifying format you wouldn't have.
So this is what's going to be interesting. At the end of the year, we can take note of this conversation and we can see if it hindered or if it helped.
So we look at their 6 sprints versus every other weekend that was regular qualifying and see where they placed higher. I'm on board with that. That's a good idea. The last thing with sprint races, relaxed parc fermé rules. Basically, parc fermé is what you enter in whenever your car is released to go out into the qualifying session.
Yeah.
You are basically locking in, this is our car for this race. This is our packages that we're running. This is the aero. This is everything that's going to be on our car. The only difference is we can change around the tires, right? There's a couple other things they can tweak here or there, but essentially that's the car. In the sprint race format, we talked about this in our What is F1 episode. Basically, that kind of goes away because now you have, instead of practice, qualify, race, 3 practice, qualify, race, you have practice, qualify, practice, race, race. It's a whole thing. No, there's only 2 practices, right?
Right. It's practice,
qualify, practice, race.
race.
Yeah, and so basically you can't lock in the car going into qualifying because there's another practice session after that where you're supposed to be able to test new things on the car.
Well, see, that's what's weird. I thought that last year when they were doing these sprint races after qualifying, you were locked in for the sprint race or for the next practice, the sprint race, and the last race.
And apparently that's either changed or we misread it from last year because the way that I read it was relaxed part firme, and that's what they're going with.
I'm wondering.
So maybe the sprint race locks it?
Yeah, I'm wondering to what extent that is. Like, is it like you can tweak the suspension a little bit if you want to, or if you want to tweak the rear wing, or if
completely different wing on the front.
Right, or if you can change the complete, like go with a completely different front nose to where it has more downforce or less downforce, less drag, whatever it is.
Switch engine providers in the middle of a race weekend.
Probably not. I don't think that falls under relaxed, but
Alpine's like, we're dropping Renault and going with Honda.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, I've got a little game lined up for you. So all week, Jeremiah's been talking about, I know all these team principles so well, and I could rattle them off left and right. You give me the team, I'll give you the principle. Well, that's too easy.
Oh, no.
So I'm going to give you a fun fact, tidbit, Wikipedia entry on each team principle, and I want you to try to guess which team principle it is.
Okay.
Your benefit is there's only 10 of them. You have all their names in front of you. So you can't pick anybody that's not on the board. So you've got that going for you.
All right.
If you don't get it, I'll make it pretty quick. I'll just give it to you.
That's fine.
But then we can have a little bit of a discussion on maybe what they do or what they bring to the table. We don't know a lot about all these guys. Some of them are brand new. Some of them have just been in the shadows. So let's get into this. 21 years at Mercedes. This team principle.
Okay. I'm going to go Toto Wolff.
No.
21 years at Mercedes? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I know this. Is it James Vallis?
It's James Vallis, or however you say his name. And apologies in advance. We are not getting all of these names right. There is no way.
There's not a chance.
So James Valls, or whatever his name is, he is the team principal of Williams Racing.
And I actually have a tidbit on him is that he was the strategy director for Mercedes prior.
Okay, so I'm going to mark this one off the board. Which team principal was a lawyer? Has very little racing background other than they got a law degree and then got into executive racing business.
Jeez.
Take a shot.
Gunther?
Not Gunther. It is Alessandro Alumini Bravi for Alfa Romeo.
And yet, unfortunately, he's one of the ones that I just don't know too much about.
I don't think anybody does.
Well, considering he's new.
And it's Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
Okay. Degree in aeronautical engineering and owned their own racing team. Not an F1 team, but a racing team.
Christian Horner.
Nope.
No?
No.
Okay, hold on. I'm
not saying that he doesn't have those things.
No,
I'm just saying that this guy has these things.
Owned a racing team. Frederick Vassar.
It is.
Wow.
Is that a complete shot in the dark?
Not necessarily. I've done research on a lot of these guys. It's not necessarily I'm going in dark like you talked about before. I know everything except I don't.
Who's he the new team principal of?
Who?
Who's he the new team principal of?
He took over Ferrari.
He took over Ferrari for Matteo, and I'm interested to see what that is. We've had a lot of debate about how much of a role Matteo played at Ferrari and kind of their, I'm going to call it a failure of a year because they had a car and drivers that could win the whole thing. I know they still got second and they finished really high in the driver standings, but they could have won the whole thing. And I think that's why Ferrari made a move, and I'm interested to see if this Frederick makes a change. Okay. Headed up a Formula 3000 team and bought a racing trailer from, at the time, a rival, but now a mentor.
That's Christian Horner.
Why is that Christian Horner?
Because I've done research on that.
Who do you buy the trailer from?
Who
was a rival that's now a mentor?
Oh, it was, God, I know this one.
Big name in Red Bull Racing.
I know, I looked it up.
Driver mentor.
Yeah, it's the young driver, the Helmut Marko.
There it is.
I couldn't think of his name.
So they used to be rivals whenever they were doing the whole
Right.
feeder F1 series thing and all that, and now they're best friends. You're doing actually really well so far. Performance engineer for Michael Schumacher and Kimi Räikkönen in the early 2000s. Early and mid 2000s.
Let's go with...
There's only like 6 left.
Franz Toast?
Nope.
Okay, last guess, and then just go for it. Mike Kratt.
Nope. Andrea Stella.
Really? That I didn't know.
McLaren. McLaren is an interesting team where if you're watching Drive to Survive, you don't see the team principal.
No.
You see the CEO.
You see Zach Brown.
Zach Brown, who's the CEO, runs McLaren Racing and all the stuff that comes along with it. I don't know why they chose to go that route.
I'm going to go with personality reasons. I think
He does have a good personality.
Right. And at the time, he also brings an American aspect. So there's that.
Yeah, he's very American, working in England.
Very American.
Also, that McLaren headquarters is awesome.
But I want to say that it was more of the personality aspect in that whenever this Drive to Survive season first started with season 1, I think that the team principal at the time wasn't as bubbly, energetic, controversial, whatever you want to say. So I think that they leaned on Zach Brown because he brought the American ideals, but he was also a former racer, and he's got a lot of personality.
I like that, and we did this thing early in our F1 fan-ness or whatever, where we would go on Google Maps and find all the racetracks and stuff. Well, I also went and found all the team headquarters and all that.
Yeah, I did that as well.
By far, McLaren has the coolest headquarters. Well, that circle lake thing with the teardrop building.
That's the problem. It's
so
because
cool.
they have so much money, which is why we're so frustrated with them.
Be better, McLaren. Okay, won 24 hours Nürburgring.
Really?
Yeah. Who? Not Zach Brown.
Otmar?
No.
Okay, last guess. That's Toto.
That's Toto Wolff.
Wow. That was a shot in the dark.
My second clue was his wife is also a racing driver and test driver.
That I would have gotten. I did not know that he won the 24-hour Le Mans?
No, Nürburgring.
Nürburgring.
Not Le Mans.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, the Nürburgring's long.
Really long.
Jeez.
The track is long. The race is still 24 hours.
yeah.
But obviously his wife, Susie, is all big into racing. But Toto Wolff, we've said it before, I think in episode 1, he is what I think every racing executive aspires to be, has a history in racing, has a family in racing, co-owns Mercedes AMG F1 Racing. Patronus. How do you co-own with Mercedes?
I don't know, man. And I could be wrong on this. I think I did some research on this. I think Christian Horner also co-owns
he's got
the
some
Red
piece
Bull
of it.
racing team.
Right.
Not necessarily Red Bull, the brand.
Yeah.
But the racing team, I think he has some kind of ownership in that as well.
When you win 4 championships in a row, I think you have some negotiating power.
Right. And then 2 more later on.
Yeah. Okay. Founded a company that released the first official Formula One timing and track positioning app on iPhone.
Franz Toast.
Nope.
Last guess, Otmar.
It is Otmar
Boom.
Snozfenauer. However you say his last name. I know I've heard it, but I just can't repeat it.
And if this is coming off offensive, we are so sorry. We genuinely have no idea how to pronounce these names.
Otmar is seen in Drive to Survive. They just don't say his name that much. But he is the team principal for Alpine. I think the only thing about them that is not French is him.
Pretty much.
My other side note was for him was he went to school actually in Detroit in the U.S., and got a job at Ford US and worked for Formula Ford.
Jeez.
All before moving over to the European side of the business. Okay, we have 3 more. Spent 14 non-consecutive, so they were split up, 14 years with various BMW racing teams. Who is it?
For various BMW teams. Oh, that's Franz.
No.
How?
Stop guessing Franz.
Look, man. Clearly, I don't know these guys as well as I thought.
Mike Crack.
Is it really?
Which is a funny name. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So he's the Mike Crack is the team principal for Aston Martin, who is now bringing in Fernando Alonso. We'll see what they can do with it. Okay, last 2. So your odds of getting these are really strong because I know you're going to get one of these. Started as the team principal of Toro Rosso in 2005 and allegedly assaulted our favoritely named driver, Scott Speed. Allegedly.
that's Franz.
That's Franz.
I love that that's the fact that you chose to represent him.
As I go to his wiki, none of these guys have super long Wikipedia pages unless you're talking about Christian Horner, Toto Wolff, a couple of the others that have really just dominated racing. Most of them are like a paragraph. And on his, that's about half of his page is assaulting Scott Speed. Allegedly. Okay, last one, so not really a guess. He's always looking for more money from Gene.
I hate that you used him last, but that's Gunther.
Gene, he needs more money. He doesn't know what's going on.
I don't know, Gene. I don't know.
So Gunther Steiner, and I didn't mention Franz is the team principal of AlphaTauri. Right. I said Toro Rosso, but Toro Rosso obviously changed into AlphaTauri.
Yeah, and one more tidbit on Franz before we jump into the Gunther talk. Did you know that Franz has been on the same team since 2005?
Yeah, when he took over Toro Rosso.
That's insane, man.
They just work. The whole Red Bull thing just works.
That's 17 years as one position.
They set it up from success from the start, and they just keep doing it.
Was it success, though?
Yeah, because you're talking about the whole Red Bull Junior team.
We're talking about the Red Bull Junior team that finished in 9th in the Constructors' Championship?
Look at all the drivers that have come from it.
Oh, dang it. All right, fine. You can have it.
Carlos, Max.
Yeah,
all of them.
I understand.
Okay, last is Gunther Steiner, obviously the team principal of Haas. He does have a much better career than just asking Gene for money, but he probably is the most personable team principal. He's not afraid to tell you what he thinks.
No.
He goes from clearly trying to encourage and motivate his drivers to showing his frustration outright when they are not doing what he thinks they're capable of. On camera, so much so that he fired K-Mag and then brought him back. So yeah, he's probably our favorite team principal.
Without a doubt. And that's partially thanks to Drive to Survive, which granted gave him the platform where he could go and publicly speak on camera in front of all of the fans. I think he's won over all of America.
Yeah.
And not because of him being the American team principal, strictly personality. He is a character. He's literally a walking cartoon character.
We found out that he lives in North Carolina, which is where Haas is based. Now, Haas's racing operation during the season is run out of the UK for logistics reasons,
right.
But in the off season they have a facility in North Carolina, and he lives in North Carolina, or at least has a home there. And I find it so funny that there is somebody that has just run into him at a Kroger.
Just imagine one day
he's looking at mangoes.
You're reaching for a box of Frosted Flakes and, oh, no way, get out of here.
And it's the time where he was doing ads for all those companies, so he's on the box.
So that was everything 2023 for this year's Formula One. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation. We hope that you'll enjoy future conversations as we continue to post more and more episodes weekly. Thomas, do you have anything for them?
I do. So like Jeremiah mentioned, we will be starting this next week as the season kicks off, posting race recaps on Monday. They will be shorter episodes, very, very unplanned because we will have recorded them just after the race ended.
Oh, yeah.
And then we will still be doing our weekly episodes every Friday. But this week, be on a lookout for a special predictions episode that we try to squeeze in before the season kicks off.
I like it. So with that, guys, that's all we got. See ya.
See ya.